Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you are listening to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, which is currently led by those plucky little upstarts, Coleraine. It's all starting to look pretty nice for those Bannsiders and their big contracted stars, but we ask, what have they looked to have done right so far, where others have forked out and ultimately failed? We'll look ahead to this big time clash between the Blues and Coleraine on Saturday afternoon. We'll also look back at all the games that happened over the weekend on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. Spooky season might be in the rear view, but fingers crossed there'll be no scares on this podcast. Definitely not when I'm joined and I'm in the company of Coleraine Chronicle sports editor Damian Mullan.
Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, indeed.
Trick or treat?
Well, there's no tricks up in the North Coast these days. It's all treat after treat after treat.
Well, I'm not far be it for me to say, but yes, things are okay. But listen, I don't want to sound like your proverbial manager here, but we're only 12.
If you say we're taking this one game at a time, this podcast is over.
No, but you know what I'm saying. Listen, managers like you and I, we've interviewed managers ad infinitum, and we know, and we're now conditioned almost to think like the managers themselves. They won't say it. They'll say they take one game at a time. But listen, as fans, and I guess the people listening to this podcast, fans of all different clubs. And it's the fans, and they're allowed to dream and dare to dream and everything else. And that's part of the attraction. That goes with being a football fan. So yes, fans can, but in the media, myself and the players and management, we'll just keep it nice and cozy, Peter.
Let's talk about management. We're starting quite strong. This week, Rory Higgins, it feels like he's made a massive difference to that club.
Do you know what, Peter? He really has. I mean, I'm not obviously privy to what goes on day to day at the showgrounds in terms of the training or his approach to management or whatever. But I think it's clear to anybody to see there has been a change. You only have to look at the performances of the team. Never mind the results, but even just look at the performances of the team and the players. And then obviously allied to that, their league position. But there does, and I've said it probably a couple of weeks ago as well, it just seems to be a different mentality, for want of a better word, among the players and the coaching setup and everything else. And that's no disrespect to what happened last year. It was a difficult year for Dean Shields and Michael O'Connor, because they were basically dealing with the transition, the first year of the transition between part-time and full-time. They obviously didn't get much time to bring in players. I think they had maybe 1-2 transfer windows. So they did what they could, but I just get the sense or the feeling from what I've seen with my own eyes and talking to Rory on a weekly basis, that there just seems to be a renewed focus and a determination. And the thing is, and he's referenced it a number of times, even when he's been interviewed, about the hunger within the group and the determination to do well, and the hunger to go and win games and to win things. And you're on the outside, like, and many supporters are, and they'll look at Coleraine and they'll go, yeah, but the money, that's fine. Yeah, it's okay having money and being able to buy players. That's one aspect of it, but it's what you then do with the money and with the players that you bring in. You have to formulate a team, a squad. You have to have the players buying into it and retaining that hunger. And so far, so good. It appears to be working.
I haven't really got to talk to you too much about this, but
No.
you're a wily operator. You've seen the ups and downs for Coleraine as well as.
Not my first,
Yes.
not my first rodeo. That's
But
for
you've
sure.
also seen it across the league, and you were on this podcast over the past few years as we saw talk of money with other teams and how they invested it. I know it's starting to look quite rosy based on what's happening on the pitch, and there not being many murmurs that there's drama off it up in your part of the world. But are you surprised how well it's going, and were you not slightly nervous when you saw not only the likes of Joel Cooper and all being touted and being brought up to the club, but just how quick and how significant the investment has been.
100%, Peter. I mean, it was what, probably 2 years ago that maybe we were sitting in this podcast and we were talking about Coleraine transforming from a part-time club to a full-time club. And I suppose when you look how far that the club has come in that 2 years, and as everybody knows, that the main guy at Korean is Henry Ross. And to be fair, Henry's come in, and again, I'm not privy to finances. It's above my remit, that. But what I would say is, yes, like, clubs have money, but it's, I guess, what you do with that money and how you use that money. And thus far, given the fact that I just said that it's early days of the season, but it seems that the money seems to be invested well. Rory Higgins has obviously went and brought in a number of his own players, allied to what was here. But as I said previously, it's okay. It's one thing having money and being able to throw money at it, but that doesn't guarantee any kind of success. We all know, we've seen clubs on this side of the water. We've seen clubs in England with money, and doesn't always guarantee success. And there's no guarantees it's going to bring success to Korean either. But what I would say is that at the early stages, from what we've seen in the field, there seems to be a togetherness among the group, and that's not easy to achieve, Peter. When you bring in big name players, you spend big money, you have to then formulate a team spirit with a group of guys that maybe haven't played together prior to this season. You have to then keep players that aren't in the first team or the first 11 but are sitting on the bench, good players themselves. You have to keep them happy. So if you, as a management or a coaching setup, can achieve that, it certainly gives you a fighting chance of doing something, doesn't it?
Well, we've seen that. You get good players in,
Mm.
doesn't mean that it always all works together. You only have to point to the way this Glentoran project has been. Is it exactly apples to apples? We don't know, as you said, about investment. We can only base it on the players that they went for and who they brought in. It's clear if you were to bring in anybody into a side, if you want to propel them towards a title push, bringing in who had consistently been the best player in the league for the past 2 years would probably be high up your list. But as we had spent many, probably hours in this podcast talking about, that was not a completely risk-free proposition. There was other mitigating factors which meant Linfield held back based on a bit of injury history, the age he was at, was he going to be able to continue at the level that he was playing at. And one of the key storylines, no matter how he played this season, was always going to be, could Joel Cooper deliver at the levels or be as impactful to the same extent he did for Linfield in a different team at Coleraine? You might argue, if you compare this 11 to last season's 11, he might actually be in a better overall team. But the main man, once again in the Irish League, is Mr. Joel Cooper, and it's the consistency of him once again, which I think is the most impressive part.
Do you know, you've explained it very, very well, Peter, because Joel Cooper, let's be honest, he was the player of the year last year. He had a big part to play in Linfield winning the league. He wouldn't have come cheap. Being the best player in any league, you're going to come with a price. As you say, there's always a little bit of, not doubt as such, but there's always reservations, as you say. You leave one club, you go to another club. There are no guarantees in this game. But I'll tell you something, what a player. Like, we would maybe get to see Linfield 3, 4 times in the season, or 4 or 5, 6, whatever, if you played them in the cup. So you would have seen him sparingly, if you like. But then getting to watch a player of that ilk every week, and that's not to say that he stars every week or he plays a great 90 minutes every week. That's not the case. But what he does, and you hit the nail on the head, that consistency. He consistently comes up with goals. He's got 10 goals already this season out of Korean's 14 games. He's scoring more games he's scoring in than not. And a lot of his goals are similar to Linfield, I suppose, when he was there. They're game-defining goals or game-winning goals. They're important goals, but they're also damn good goals at amongst it as well. I mean,
It's Joel Cooper doing Joel Cooper things, isn't it?
uh, you know,
If you were to take him out and make him just a shadow on the pitch, and you were to show people the goals, and you'd say which Irish League player is this, most people go just the way he runs, the way he beats players, his ability to get quickly out of positions and get those snapshots off. It's everything that we knew, and if you were a Blue fan, loved about Joel Cooper. And there was always going to be somewhat of a like X type feeling. The Blues would look at Coleraine, and if it was going well, be like, oh, the one that got away. And so far, that's exactly what he feels like. And the season Coleraine are having probably puts a bit of a bow on that feeling for Blues fans.
it is. But again, Linfield have got a serious squad up there. I get maybe some of them are pining after Joel Cooper, and understandably so. If Korean had Joel Cooper for 3 years and then went to somewhere else, Korean fans would be pining after him. But a point you just said there was he was playing for obviously Linfield last year, title winning team, cantered to the league title, 20 odd points. But I guess when you look at it now, and I'm sure if you ask Joel, he's enjoying his football now because he's playing in a team with the likes of a Jamie Glacken and a Will Patching, a Matthew Shevlin, Zane Okoro, all attack-minded players. And if you're a Joel Cooper and your game is about attacking and creating and scoring goals, I mean, I'm sure if you asked him, I must ask him actually, he's probably loving his early time at Korean because it is an attractive team to play in.
You're a very good watch. I still think, I don't know how you feel about this, but the real jealousy or the kind of disdain from other clubs, be it rivals or clubs that aren't really in your stratosphere. Like, I think most clubs at the top will eventually have their detractors or their enemies, or they'll have a bitter taste in their mouth when they're doing well. And particularly a team like Coleraine, who some teams probably saw as either below them or as their rival. They were on a similar kind of pegging. To see them get this money, get these players, and all of a sudden ascend out of their own little sphere must be frustrating. But based on the football that you are producing, I'm hearing very few people going, those Bannsiders, shakes fist a cloud. People are going, what a breath of fresh air it is, and it's nice to see good football, well played. Results wise, you've had to scrape by and you've had to live slightly dangerously, or you've had to do, let's say, some of the dirty work to get across the line, but you've been definitely a breath of fresh air. How other teams' fans feel about that come game 28, 29, when you're maybe duffing them for the second time this season, 5-0, we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out.
Yeah, well, I think with any club that maybe gets a bit of investment, there is a bit of begrudgery, because we're football fans. We're sort of like, oh, I wish that was my club and my team that was getting the money. But as I said earlier, it's about how you invest and how you spend that money and how you go about formulating the best team that you can and getting that work ethic. And that's one of the things, I get what you're saying about fans of other clubs and maybe being detractors and stuff. But I think it's notable from talking to Rory and even the players, they're very level-headed, they're very focused, they're not, you know, swanning around and we've got money and giving off this vibe. It's very much, I'm not going to say that cliche, but it's about working hard. And that's the key. It's not just because we have money and good players, we can just swan about and just, there is that element that they work hard and they work hard for each other and they work hard for the fans and the club because they probably know themselves because they have that money and they're able to attract the players like a Joel Cooper. that some people out there probably waiting and wanting to see them fall on their face somewhat.
Well, I definitely thought that was going to be the case going into this season. If we can all remember that I did predict at the start of the season that Coleraine would be champions. We're obviously not there yet, but people thought that Coleraine aren't going to be close to this, And I thought it was going to be Linfield and Coleraine going up against it, and maybe as we get deeper into the season, that will come to fruition. But as we see it, we have four big teams at the minute. Just reflecting on some of the transfers in, do you feel that perhaps Coleraine and Rory Higgins isn't getting enough credit for how well the recruitments went? Because of course you've had the money to get these players in, but they've been chosen very, very well, and how they've fitted into the overall 11, 18 feels seamless. And to get this quality of football in has been another one of the masterstrokes. You haven't got it where you're like, how can we play all these players in the same team? The players you brought in have somewhat complemented a Jamie Glacken rather than force him to play an awkward position because we've brought in somebody else on big money.
As testament, I think, to the quality of the coaching setup. Obviously spearheaded by Rory Higgins, but I guess when you look back through Rory Higgins' career, he's still relatively young. I think he's just maybe over 40, but he's vastly experienced both as a player, as a footballer himself. He obviously had time at Coventry as a young fella, then in the Irish League, or sorry, the League of Ireland, spent years winning everything that there was to win at Dundalk as a player. Went into coaching then under Stephen Kenny. There don't come too many more than Stephen Kenny who knows how to put a team together. Won plenty as a coach at Dundalk, then went with obviously Stephen to the Republic of Ireland senior men's team. A couple of years at Derry City, sort of was unlucky probably not to win the league, and they end up there as well. So you've got a coach or a head coach there that's vastly experienced, worked with some top quality individuals, a likes of a Stephen Kenny, who many would regard as a pretty savvy manager in his own right. So, like, Rory has obviously picked up an awful lot. He's obviously a student of the game, but and he comes across as a nice guy. But I would say there's an inner steel to him that maybe we don't see, that can get the best out of players. But I think between him and his coaches, I think they're able to target players. And I go back to what you said, your point. They're able to do their homework, target specific players that, like you pointed out, will help assimilate into the group, and not upset the imbalance too much.
You, of course, are going to tell me that despite all these players coming in, and we've seen the likes of Patching and to a lesser extent McGregor Star at the minute outside of Cooper, because you probably count him as much as we probably think of him as a January edition. Shevlin's the one main man up top at the minute, and Dylan Boyle the forgotten man
Yeah.
in midfield.
Listen, Rory has referenced it, because people have said to him at various times this season about all the new signings, and he has been at pains to point out that most weeks you look through that Korean team, and about three-quarters of it have been there last year and maybe the year previous to that as well. So for all the talk that there is about the investment and the bringing in of the players, the core of that team has been there. Your Lyndon Keynes, your Chevys, your Dylan Boys, your Jamie Glackens, numerous players like that. Um, but Shevlin, 100 goals, and 193 appearances for Korean. I think I think he goes under the radar. I don't think he particularly gets the credit that he should. 100 goals and 193 appearances. That's what, a goal less than every two games. I don't think he gets.
And it hasn't always been in this Korean side
No,
either.
exactly. Exactly. I don't think he gets the credit that he arguably deserves. I think he's been the Golden Boot winner in the Irish League maybe two out of the last three seasons. And as you rightly pointed out, not in this particular Korean team, with the greatest respect, maybe Korean teams that weren't quite as good. And yet he was still plundering 20 plus league goals in a season.
Well, he is being aided, or perhaps they're stealing his thunder a wee bit by Joel Cooper coming together and doing his thing. I've said this before. I think you'll agree with me and say that we saw signs of this earlier on in the calendar year, but Glacken still seems like the man that, you know, has really, really found his footing. He saw flashes, but he looks like a real dominant force over the past few months.
Yeah, and I guess again, Glacken's probably looking around him, and he's got Dylan Boyle, Will Patchen, Joe Cooper, Matthew Shevlin, Lewis McGregor. You know, ha- of course you're going to probably play better, arguably, or and maybe he knows he has to play better, which is maybe key to it as well, because given the competition for places in the squad, and I think that's an important aspect that we haven't mentioned, the competition for places means that nobody can take their place for granted. If you don't play well for a week or a game, you may find yourself on the bench because there's a player that will come in and take your shirt. And I think that's probably key to how well Coleraine have started this year, that competition for
Because when
places.
I talk to other people, they always say, and it's always a different player. See, that player's not getting the game for Coleraine, or that because he just happened to see that they've been on the bench for 2 weeks out of nowhere, and people are thinking, oh, maybe they've been found out and they're not a part of it. It just rotates. So far this season, you're top of the league, which is great. You know, we'll talk about all those games in hands for other sides in a bit. You've
Mm.
had a few tests. You know, you have that big game with
Mhm.
Lauren at the start of the season, which you get the best of them. You then lose to Glentoran, which people are wondering, maybe is it the first real big test that they failed? You then play against Linfield, finally midweek there, where you're 2-0 down at halftime. Two pretty big blunders from the goalkeeper, I would personally say. But you just come back and you boss that second half. Really, you should have taken all 3 points.
If the game had had another few minutes at a time, I think the momentum was obviously with Coleraine. But yeah, I mean, listen, people might think everything, Coleraine just turn up and beat teams. That hasn't been the case. You've referenced it. Larne was hard. Glentoran was hard. Glenavon away was hard. Matthew Shevlin scored in the 90th minute to get a win down there. Games against Portadown have been hard. So it's not just a case, if anybody hasn't seen Coleraine, that they just turn up and they win games because they've got good players. That doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. As you know, Peter, most football fans know you don't just turn up and win games. You've got to work hard for it. But the Linfield game, if anybody had offered Coleraine a point at half time, they would have bitten their hand off because, as you say, first half, Linfield, to their credit, were really, really good in the first half. They absolutely sort of, I suppose, put Coleraine out of their stride a little bit. I don't know quite if Coleraine were expecting the Linfield team
Mm-hmm.
performance that they got. So it kind of took a little bit of time for Coleraine to sort of find their feet, if you like. By that stage, Linfield had scored twice, as you said. The keeper, they'll have better days. But listen, it's hard to imagine. He's 18.
He's
I
a big
mean,
boy for 18, I'll
people
say
tend
that.
to. Well, this is the thing. He is a big lad. Because of his
Yeah.
physique. People don't think he's 18. And in that first half, if you remember, he had the Linfield
Yes, he did.
fans right, right behind him. Now, this guy's 18. He's from Newcastle. He's on loan from Newcastle United. He's played under 20 games. He's reserve
Welcome
games.
to the Irish League,
He ha
son.
he has never experienced anything like a thousand blue men in his ears for the 45 minutes. So we cut him some slack for that. He will learn loads from that. That'll be an experience for him, and he will learn from that. But the manner in which Coleraine responded after half time, and what was noticeable was Rory Higgins didn't hang about making changes. He
At
changed
halftime.
two players at half time, and he admitted in his interview afterwards, he kind of admitted that he got his team selection wrong in the first instance. So he was big enough to sort of put his hands up, say, I got it wrong. He was obviously trying to second guess what Linfield may be doing, pick the team maybe accordingly, but seen the error of his ways. And credit to him for doing that. At half time, he didn't waste any time. He moved, made the changes, completely transformed Coleraine and the game. And as you said, if it had been another few minutes, every chance that Coleraine would have scored a last minute winner. But listen, they would have been happy with a point.
Well, you
So
must be buoyed by that one of the big tests going down to that Linfield team. Yes, they're not all guns blazes at the minute, but to come back and not be overawed by the situation, that's a real positive.
mhm.
Yes, of course, you really want to make your home games against these other top sides count, but you've gone from that game to just stretching your muscles once again. And yeah, it didn't come easy in the first half, but eventually you were flat track bullies against Glenavon, sadly for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough watch. The opening 45 minutes of the Saturday, I'll tell you, myself and my colleagues in the press box, we were sort of wondering what we were going to write about because it was pretty turgid a large part, and that's credit to Glenavon as well. Obviously, they've got their own problems this year, but they came with a game plan, stuck rigidly to it. Were very, very difficult to break down, and it was only Joel Cooper, there he is again, scored 3 minutes before the break, and that just sort of, I suppose, eased whatever tension or nerves there may have been around the showgrounds. Second goal, I think it was 6 minutes after half time, 2-0, and effectively that was good.
Inch perfect. It
Mm.
was.
Oh, the second, Joel Cooper's
Yeah.
one of the sweetest strikes you will see. He just came on there and he just caressed the ball into the net. It was.
Well, in the end, it's 5-1. It's 5-1 because
Mm,
of another, maybe you call it sweet strike. It was definitely a punt from young McGovern to give Glenavon a
mm.
consolation and bust anybody's Coleraine clean sheet docket if they had it. It was looking pretty bad before the goalkeeper, Mark Byrne, got sent off with about 10 minutes to go. You piled on the pressure. And I mean,
Yeah.
they're not having many happy memories. And this kid Glenavon, they just remember getting duffed. I mean, there's something to be said here where yes, we know they're not particularly good, and then they're trying to get themselves together with their new boss. But that's kind of two games where they've come in, tried to be hard to beat, and it only really works for so long. And then when eventually some people find the key, it all kind of falls
Yeah.
apart. That's the worrying thing that despite them trying to be hard to beat, the result looks anything but.
It's tough. You know, new managers come in, as you said, it's hard. You want to be hard to beat, but Peter, you have to somehow get something at the other end as well. You have to try to pick up points, which they desperately need. I mean, they've scored 5 goals all season. I mean, that's arguably where their problem is, putting the ball in it. They've got 5 goals this year. Korean have scored 33. There's a sort of a tale, the tale of the tape, isn't it?
Any players you could lend them maybe to help them
Well,
with
we're going to speak
such a
maybe.
cause? Well, you've been on the side of it where commonly you've
Mm.
been the far better side that the most teams in this league. Do they look like the worst to you? I know they gave you a good go on it at More in View, which I think is getting referenced a lot, but there is plenty of games to go.
There's
But
lots of games. It, but yeah, do you know, it's they're missing players. Peter Campbell's a big miss. Peter Campbell's a huge miss for Glenavon. He's been injured quite some time. Like Peter Campbell would probably get a game with any team in that league, and he would be such a vital player for Glenavon going forward. And to have him missing the start of the season is huge. They have good players. It's just yeah, it's difficult for them because they're so, I suppose, cut adrift that every game they go into, there's that enormous weight of pressure on you because it's almost like even there's only 14 games of the season gone, every game you go into, because there's that gap, that enormous pressure, we need a result, and that just, I can imagine what that must be like in the changing room or stepping onto the field knowing that we need to win. Like other teams are in a better position. Well, we can go out here and we're not in a bad position. If we get a draw, we're okay. But I just think for them, the pressure must be unbearable.
Yeah, it's there's plenty of fans who maybe it's just to save a bit of face. They're kind of going, yeah, yeah, we don't care. It's over already. But
Yeah, but that's hard
the
to do, isn't it?
yeah,
You know.
well, I think, and I've even seen discussion about this recently online. And to be honest, I kind of thought about this a number of weeks ago. You look at players like Paul McGovern, right? Looks to
Yeah,
be a young talent. Having
good
the
player.
second name McGovern at the minute, not a bad thing either.
Good
Um,
player.
he's out of contract at the end of the season. There's no
Mhm.
way he's playing in
No,
Glenavon Blue next season. Doesn't matter
no.
what division they are in. So as much as they're hoping and willing that they're maybe only a couple of wins away for their long term future, do they cash in January? And even when they come to January, do they try and bring in players to get them across the line who either aren't appropriate for the championship or will be gone in the championship and then they're rebuilding again? Or do they try and build a core who will be there come rain or shine? A lot of tough conversations
That's tough.
coming their way in Lurgan.
It is tough because you mentioned about supporters online and some of them almost that fatalistic attitude where we're down already. Now that can seep into a club, and there's a lot of games. But if that starts seeping into the fans and the players, it's it's almost like a fait accompli where you're like, oh well, sure, what's the point then? Like, I can't imagine playing in that scenario. It's so
You,
difficult.
now, we kind of knew this was a situation that O'Connor was going to take on, but
Mm.
it's tough. And of course, as a manager, he has actually got a win for the club, the only
Yeah,
win that they've got. But um, you know, at the minute, really, you look at any club outside of the top four,
yeah.
no one's really looking at any game as an easy game, bar of course. If it is Glenavon's looking at every game like, oh, this is a tough one against everybody. So
From afar, it does seem that Glenavon did bring in players in the close season as well. And there does seem to be sort of a rump of Glenavon fans because Glenavon went and brought players in. And it seems to be the gripe is that the players that they brought in haven't really improved the situation.
and just as importantly, the players that have left them haven't done the business. I've talked about this before. You know, when you're a club that's not at the absolute tippy top of the league, you're oftentimes bringing in a player who either isn't ready to step up, a player who's making the step down but has concerns around motivation, health, or just overall standard of play. So sometimes you just get it. You get them all wrong, because I predicted the likes of Carrick to fall away a number of seasons because you look at some of those players and you think, well, come on, Albert Watson, Cushley, can't keep doing it, but they do. Glenavon kept on getting these older players from former championship winning sides, but they just kept performing and doing well. But of course, the year they bring in a couple of young players, like Murphy and McClelland, and then bring some players from the League of Ireland like Lombardo, players from other sides like Chris Lowe, who you think could do a bit of business. They've all been the negative. They've all regressed to what you hope they wouldn't be, where Lombardo struggled to settle. Chris Lowe's barely kicked the ball. Murphy just maybe hasn't been up to the standard they hoped he would be. And
Kyle McClelland was at Coleraine last year.
yeah,
He
hasn't
was in the bench.
settled.
He was in the bench for Glenavon Saturday. Didn't get on.
And I just think, and we've seen it with Ballymena, we've seen it to a lesser extent with Portadown, maybe you could say with Loughall last year. This league, regardless if people think it's the worst it's ever been, the quality and the professionalism keeps on progressing. And unless your club is taking significant steps or attempts to take steps forward, and I'm not saying Glenavon didn't try to do that, but unless you're doing that, you could so easily fall behind. And that Ballymena one is the biggest one. They kind of settled a wee bit and they nearly got stung. And for Glenavon, unfortunately, and I think if Glenavon go down, for example, and all the teams that stay up are the teams next year, right? Everybody, pretty much from everybody that isn't in the top four, if they just maybe don't make signings or somebody moves on or the players they bring in don't make a difference, every single one of them could be next season's Glenavon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm including likes of
Do you know,
Cliftonville and Crusaders and that. In fact, there's a chance Crusaders are going to be this year's Ballymena.
well, I'm sitting here looking at the league table. Crusaders are second bottom on 10. And for all the talk that we just talked about Glenavon being so poor, Crusaders are only 7 points better off. Now, you wouldn't have thought that. You sort of think Glenavon have been more cottage. But you look at that potentially, Glenavon get a couple of wins back to back, Crusaders maybe lose a couple of games, and all of a sudden it's Crusader. Like like from what you're talking, you only have to look at the league table, Peter, and there's almost like a two-tier system there in the league at the moment. You've got your full-time clubs that maybe have enjoyed a bit of investment or have been professional or full-time for a number of years and have that in place. You've got them at the top, and then you've got the sort of the remainder of the clubs. And I mean, would you agree? Do you think there's like a almost like a two-tier system within the league at
This
present?
season, it's looking like it. Now, saying that,
Mm,
I wouldn't say performance-wise. You're seeing it week in and week out. You even said it there. Like you look at, there's Cliftonville being able to make it difficult there for Linfield on
mm.
Saturday. As much as Portadown did beat Linfield, they were level at half time against Coleraine. They will get onto the game against Glentoran there. You wouldn't have been able to pick out if they were both wearing playing kits who the full time team is and who the part time team is. So
That's true, actually.
so yes,
Yeah.
I'm they're not blowing teams away outside of your lot, of course, but it's the consistency of results. And actually, let's stick with Crusaders if we're talking about them, and actually a team who's being very consistent at the minute, Dungannon. We all praised Dungannon last year, and then they have that awful start to the season. And ever since then, they've been slowly but surely getting results. And yes, they've not been beating all the big boys, as we were just suggesting there with the top four and the two tier, which I agree is
Mm.
there. But actually, if maybe they had won one or two of those games at the start of the season, I think people would be taking them a lot more seriously. They are not that far away because they look to have found their stride again. They're not that far away from actually saying, excuse me, we're in the top four as well, or at least top five.
Well, definitely. Well, they're top five as we record this podcast. They're 21 points, the same as Linfield, albeit they've played a number of games more. But 4 wins out of their last 5 games, Peter. They're definitely one of the form teams in the league. And I don't know, like you were as probably surprised as I was by Dungannon's poor
Mm-hmm.
start to the season. Now, whether that was a hangover from the highs of last year, obviously doing well in the league and the cup as well. I just wonder, was there a hangover that it took him a little bit of time again just to, I suppose, readjust or refocus or whatever you want to call it. But listen, they proved last year, Peter, that they are a match for any team. And last year, they surprised a lot of people because people would have thought, oh, they'll drop away now. They'll drop away now. They'll drop. And they didn't. And they kept going. And they surprised everybody. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did the same again this year because they've got really good players, a really good team, and a really good coach. So it's whether it's like the teams with the investment, if you like. So, you could get to a situation where we all get to January. Now, do the big clubs flex their financial muscles in January and go out and spend and bring in players for the second half of the season? That's kind of where those teams have got the advantage, or those clubs have got the advantage. That if they're in the mix for challenging for honours, and a player becomes available, or if they have earmarked a player, that they can go and get him. Don't know if Dungannon can do that, and that'll mitigate against
But
them.
what's interesting about that is that if previously you would have went, who is maybe a Linfield or a Glentoran going to pick up? Who's the informed striker?
Mm,
Because I think 15 years ago, Ben Arthurs is a Glentoran player in January, and I just don't see that happening on this occasion
No.
because one, the way contracts are set up and the way the value of players are within the Irish League for the chance of maybe moving elsewhere. Irish League players are almost too expensive for the top four. It's not as economically viable.
Well,
They would rather take the risks from places down south or in England who.
that's what, in my opinion, will happen if teams move into the transfer window in January. It won't be like you've referenced taking players from other Irish League clubs. It'll be getting players maybe on loan from Scotland, from England, down south, whatever. We've seen it already. You look through all those teams: Crusaders, Linfield, Coleraine, Glentoran. They have all been recruiting from England, Scotland, League of Ireland most recently, and I that's a trend that's going to continue because those top clubs, like as you say, you look through the other Irish League clubs. Who would they take, and who could they take? Because clubs are going now.
Nah, because a lot of those sides are happily saying,
Need them.
you know what, you could go to that side and be a bit part player or even maybe a
Mm.
questionable start bench week to week. And those clubs might say, we're not going to pay you the absolute top dollar. Some teams,
Mhm.
and we've heard it, we know Ballymena are not paying Ben Kennedy, for example, a paltry sum. So there's something to be said for being the best paid player at a non top four team if you are
Mhm.
satisfied with doing that and being a part of that. And, there's a lot to be said there. You look at Dungannon and say they may benefit. Now, previous years would suggest that Dungannon are a side that are quite alluring for some of these sides based on how they set up their teams and how they develop youth. So actually, I think many of us are surprised that Glennie, as a young attacking wing back, is somehow not a full time footballer. And I'm not saying that maybe other sides are going to come in for their midfield in particular, but if we are to compare Crusaders and Dungannon, yes, I think Dungannon are by a long way better coached. But even in the formation of their side, that midfield that the Swifts have, they can call on anybody from Dillon, the Knowles, Bigorama, Alves, and even Tiernan Kelly. You look at Crusaders, and they have barely a player over 21 that they can put in that midfield, unless Forsyth is not injured. So, this game is not made up of flashy players who have high potential and they're going to perform without other material and other people to connect them on up. And that's my big worry about Crusaders, is what I've been talking about over the past few weeks. Individually, very good, but that midfield is so inexperienced and so much of a soft touch. They're being completely outrun in this league.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I know sort of Crusaders wanted to change the profile of the squad and the team and potentially the age profile as well. And it's almost like a calculated gamble, Peter, when you sort of flip things almost and you're trying to go down a different road and a different path. It's very difficult. I mean, in the past, like Korean have been in that position quite often in recent years, albeit things have changed somewhat in the last number of years with the much heralded investment. Um, so I know what it's like, watching a team that's trying to almost speculate on players and bring players in. And I think you mentioned it earlier, you're trying to bring players in and polish them up in the hope that they'll become the player that you anticipate that they can be. Korean have been there, and may be there again. They're just at this moment in time, they're privileged position that they had that nucleus of a team, and then they were able to bring in a number of players to supplement what they had. So not every club at this minute in time is able to do that. Crusaders are trying to bring those young players in and hope and get them into a system where they can get the best of them. And it is proven difficult, as their league position will tell you. And It's tough too because Declan Cadell's a relatively young manager learning his trade. So you've got a manager, coach learning on the job, and players learning on the job as well. Difficult times, but you've got to be patient too, Peter. Got to be patient.
Oh, absolutely. And we've had discussions on this podcast about how perhaps this was a sticking plaster last year. Crusaders didn't really have what could be seen as a long-term future because you could see that all these players that they were playing, from Laurie to
Yeah,
whoever, were just not going to be a part of
yeah.
the long-term solution. And they've lost Larmer, for example, at the back, who I think would have been a key player for them and helped them significantly in an important
Mhm.
area in the pitch. But just you look at that game on Saturday, it's exciting, of course, to have defenders that you think could be the next stars: Orr McCart, Evan Easton,
Uh,
Lewis Barr. But right now,
Very young.
in 2025, Killimarn and Danny Wallace
Mhm.
are running rings around them, or at least are delivering at a higher, more efficient level and are getting you results.
Yeah, it's experience, Peter, isn't it? It's There's no substitute for experience, as they say, but um, you got to learn. But those young boys have got to learn somewhere, and that's how you do it. But it runs the risk if you're learning and it's not working for you. You could find yourself in the sort of difficult circumstances.
Well, that's it, because how much, because I love their front three
Yeah.
as an idea, as a concept. I love it. Young players, fast, nippy, can pass, can absolutely outrun players. And Fraser Bryden has scored a ton of goals, kind of out of nowhere, but he still scored them, which is, you can't
Eight,
take away from him.
eight goals he
But
has.
like, it's yeah, so he's done it, and you can't take that away from him. And I think Brooks, I'm very much thinking he is having the season I thought Brooks would have had. He's usually centre player, but it can move around a few times. Look, this Crusaders situation where you're letting them grow and you're fostering them and you're hoping they will bloom, all works, and is more, it's not easy to stomach when you're a fan base like Crusaders who are expecting better things, but it's all fine if you're lurking around 8th and ninth and everything's per. But when you are 11th and you you're conceding so many goals, you're struggling to score them yourself a wee bit, and you're worrying if more injuries come, what can you do? They're being sucked in where there's significant, you know, consequences above. That was a disappointing season.
Yeah, yeah, they're probably fortunate insofar as that Glenavon had a really worse start than possibly anybody could have imagined. Because without that start by Glenavon, then Crusaders, I guess, looking at the table, would be really sort of in the difficult part. But listen,
Well, if you swap that Crusaders win against Glenavon, it's
yeah,
it's 7 points, so it's, it is that thin, and they will have these matchups. So they've only had 3 wins all year. Things can change. They've only played 12 games.
yeah,
Add in 14 points, that looks a bit better, but I'm yet to see it from them, and that's the concern.
yeah. I haven't seen them an awful lot, I'll confess. I think maybe I've seen them maybe once this year. I'll be seeing them in a couple of weeks' time, I think, again. Um, but like potentially those players up front that we've talked about, the likes of a Fraser Bryden, they have the firepower that potentially could win you games. And I guess it's what we talked about. It's at the other end of the pitch, maybe where their problems lie is like, yes, they can score, but they're maybe conceding too many, which negates all the good work they're doing going forward. Don't know what the answer is. They maybe don't have access to get the players that they need at this moment in time. The problem partly for Crusaders was that they lost so many vastly experienced players all around the same time. The Jordan Owens, your Philip Lowry's, a few other big name players all sort of came to their end at the same time. And Peter, how can you replace players like that? You, it's very, very difficult to replace players with 400 or 500 games, most of them for Crusaders, overnight. it's a near impossibility.
And especially when it looks as though the financial reality of Crusaders in 2025 is that, well, they don't have the finances to try and pick out players from elsewhere, and they're privileged because they probably are seen as a more attractive proposition for. Look at the players who've come in, those front three, Dunlop, Bryden, and Brooks. That you're Belfast based, you have a
Mhm.
bit of history behind you.
Mhm.
They're willing to pretty much throw the whole cart behind you to try and make you an attractive proposition. And the idea is they might need these players to come in, get them sold, to
Yeah.
try and bring in others. In the same way where
Yeah.
Dungannon have been able to actually build up a bit of finances so they can sign the likes of Junior to try and
Hmm.
get them to where they are. So um of course there's concerns around Crusaders. I've said that. We can all see there's a bit of smoke. Is there fire? Um Look, anything, I think safety for them is the main concern above any kind of normality. But it's the same thing for a lot of sides. Let's go to Friday night and the game between Glentoran and Portadown. Um, what I took from this game is, and I've been quite high on Glentoran, and I know that they have scraped by a fair amount, particularly at home, where it's boring and drab games, and maybe they are struggling to try and to get that flow from midfield to attack. But that game on Friday looked to be all those concerns blown up to the max. It wasn't a particularly pretty game. Two significant moments are the dagger in the heart of Portadown, who were playing a reserve keeper in Alex Murray. There was questions over his health, and maybe what happened with the second goal might indicate there was still issues there. But Glentoran get the 3 points, but I'm starting to wonder, are they going to keep up this title charge?
Well, certainly you couldn't, you wouldn't say that they won't. They have a plethora of good players across every position. They've got players of vastly experienced players. They've got a experienced manager. They have an enviable squad that anybody would be wanting or willing to have. They have that knack that you've maybe mentioned there of maybe not playing well but winning games. That's always a sort of a classic
It's
sign.
ultimately it's all that
Oh,
matters. But
it's a classic sign of a title winning team. You don't play well and you pick up the 3 points. You win, you move on. That's what title winning teams do. You don't you don't get to play good flowing football every week. That's never going to happen. But it's important that if you're not playing particularly well in a game, yet you leave with a win, that is a good sign. And uh, like Glentoran, everything about Glentoran I know and I have seen this year so far would lead me to believe they are genuine title challengers this year.
yeah, I think they're in the mix. I just think, as these games come thick and fast, we saw a whole lot of these Tuesday night games being announced there last week. Will they be able to deal with a team like a Portadown, and they'll come up Cliftonville, Dungannon, whoever, who the other sides are having a bit of difficulty against, but are getting victories. You could have seen on Friday that game could have very easily, on a kind of a very mucky pitch, actually, you could have come a cropper there, and you drop 2 points in a game where other teams are getting victories. Um, if you're looking at it from the Portadown perspective, they maybe feel hard done by, but I mean, you give away the penalty, you can question about it, and then ultimately Patrick Hubin, he is going to be dangerous, and if I was a defender, I wouldn't let him go free in the box.
Well, you see, I think that also goes back to the goalkeeper situation because I know that the reserve goalkeeper for Portadown, I would say, probably wasn't 100% fit. Obviously, Alan Blaney had got sent off, or Aaron McCary, I should say, had got sent off the week before against Coleraine, so they had to have the sub reserve keeper in. They also had a number of other players that were absent as well. I was talking to Niall Curry after that Coleraine Portadown game, and he was really clutching at straws as to who he would have in his team squad for the trip to the Oval. So given all that, I thought they performed admirably, and on another day would have left with a share of the points. But it underlines the value of a top class striker like a Pat Hooban.
Hmm.
Scores twice, wins a game, second goal. Admittedly, he was given the freedom of the park to go and head the goal, which, questionable defending, but he still has to be there. He still has to score. Scored it, he did. Takes the points and moves on. And the Glens, if they keep something like a Pat Hooban fit, you've got Jordan Jenkins as well there, Jordan Stewart, obviously. They've got the firepower to score, win games. And as I said, I think they'll definitely be thereabouts come April, May. Definitely.
The two players that impress me actually from a Portadown perspective, and he's someone that's shone when I've seen him as well. Great game for James Thielen. I mean, what a bit of work he made for himself to get that goal. And then, despite not having a whole lot of luck, really kind of knitting anything together inside the box to cause any sort of damage against Glentoran on goal, Ben Wiley looks like a nice wee player in midfield, doesn't he?
Yeah. Both of them players, James Thielen, very impressed. Very impressive. I'm sure there's a lot of sort of clubs keeping a close eye on the likes of James Thielen this year, and one or two of the sort of clubs maybe at the higher end of the league table. Might they be tempted to take a bit of a punt on James Thielen, do you think? I know he had a chance before and maybe it didn't work out for him, but he's a handful, isn't he?
Well, he was getting about. Look, he's diminutive, but then so was Heatley. You might go a few more goals, makes him a bit more exciting, but he's still very young, and in a league that's lacking in a lot of wingers, sometimes scarcity creates a higher demand. But that's a player who looks to finally only be settling in mid Ulster. So if you fire him on the bench of a Glens or whoever, is he going to regress back to maybe what we saw a year and a half ago?
I don't know. Well, maybe it may improve even
Yeah.
more.
Also, Fife was offside, was he not, for that goal?
I don't know. No, I think I don't know. I think he was on. I think he was on side. Five's a good player too. Now Five gives you everything. He's a handful too.
He scored a lot of goals, hasn't he? He's kind of
So yeah,
like Bryden. If you actually look at the
yeah.
stats, you're like, oh yeah, where is he? He has kind of got quite a lot of goals. I don't know if he's a striker, but he's playing
He-
there, I think, at the minute for Portadown. So
he's actually 5 goals. Yeah, he's a good player. Obviously, ex-Korean player as well. So yeah, good player. Honest, good hard worker, and has a bit about him as well.
well,
Peter.
Linfield and Cliftonville could have done with some of that on Sunday. Let's not spend too much
I was
time.
a tough watch. I was a
I
tough
mean, it
watch.
looked like an exhibition game, didn't it? Just this kind of weird, sunny, cold game where no one looked in tune. They all looked like they slightly didn't know each other. It's another mini outburst saying it was rubbish.
It was a hard watch, and
Not totally unexpected, this result, it must be said.
well, I don't know. Neither side played particularly well, but when you consider or you compare and you contrast that game, the Cliftonville Linfield game on the iPlayer on the Sunday afternoon, it was like a 0-0 draw. It wasn't a great deal of excitement, and you compare that to the Tuesday night previously, where you had Linfield coming to the showgrounds. I think it was about 4,000 there under the lights. Great atmosphere, great game. It just shows you the football, isn't it? The contrast that you have great atmosphere game and then one that was just sadly lacking. And I can understand why Rory Higgins, speaking to him after the game on Saturday, and he actually said that he can see why people prefer night games because of the atmosphere.
Yeah, like that's
Yeah.
like we're starting to see a bit more like,
Yeah.
and it's maybe not a good thing for some of the other
But-
teams,
but-
but
No, I mean that one at Solitude, it was like a Sunday afternoon stroll or something. It was just
it's like a lot of people are willing these Sunday games to be rubbish because they don't want them to succeed because it's just not what they're used to. Like I can see the attraction in the sense of, I was able to watch a game on Friday. You can go see a game on Saturday. You can watch. I was able to watch the game on Sunday there for my sins, and like I watch so much NFL on a Sunday. Like I get it. You can just gobble up all these games, and I'm sure people have the same thing for Premier League football. But at the minute, the Sunday games feel odd. You could combine the two. Sunday evening, as has been suggested on this
Yeah,
podcast
I
before.
don't know. I don't know. What now? There seemed to be a bit of a lack of an atmosphere at Solitude on Sunday, and whether that was owing to the fact that Rangers and Celtic happened to be playing in the League Cup semi-final round about the same time, may have had an impact on the numbers that attended the
Perhaps,
game,
but
and then that
I'm yet to hear anybody say,
that
were the
atmosphere.
players watching it somewhere as well on their boots?
No. But I mean, in terms of
Yes,
crowd
that's fair.
attending the game, there's bound to be an impact. Like, football fans want to go watch their team, but there's a big game on the TV, and
And neither fan base in particular are saying this is an exciting game as a proposition for the way both their teams have been playing.
yeah, yeah, that's probably true as well. Whenever your team's not going particularly well, you always find maybe another excuse
Yes.
not to go, don't you? Oh, I'll just give it a miss
Yeah.
the day, or
You speaking from
oh, I have
experience,
to be shot with a misses.
Mr. Mullan?
Nah. Like, no. Unfortunately, my duties require me to go. So whether I want to or not or whatever, but I get it. The casual fan, shall we say, the casual fan that we talk about in the game. If your team's not playing particularly well, you could just think, I'll give it a miss. But that's fans, and they're more than entitled to it. It maybe it doesn't come cheap following your team week after week after week. So maybe the odd time you have to sort of go, well, I'll give that one a
Well,
miss.
we're seeing a couple of these rogue half-5 games on a Saturday, and this weekend it was Ballymena and Larne in the Slimish skirmish. Wasn't a particularly feisty encounter, but this Larne side, they do have their off days, there's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. But when they get going and when they're not completely knocked off their stride, they look very proficient and they look dangerous.
They've been there and done it,
Like
Peter.
there is something about
You know,
this Larne side that
yeah.
just look like they've shaken off the hangover that we saw last year, and they just look determined again to be a force. Yes, they're not dominating and blowing teams away in the same manner as Coleraine, but they never really look flustered against Ballymena. Maybe that's showcasing that they're going up against a team who've now lost 4 in a row. But Paul O'Neill's back in the side, and he really put himself about.
And Leroy Miller, which is a massive boost for them as well. Leroy and Paul O'Neill. But you're absolutely right in what you're saying. They've been there and done it, Peter. In recent years, okay, not last year, but in recent years, they've been there, they've done it. They know how to win games, they know how to win the title. That experience of being able to do that is going to be crucial. We talked earlier in the program about Coleraine and Glentoran vying for the title. Like, neither of them have won the title anytime recently. Now, you imagine like Glentoran or a Coleraine being in that scenario come business end of the season where you're maybe potentially in with a chance of winning the league. Now, like any team that hasn't won it for any great length of time, regardless, there's going to be nerves, there's going to be a little bit of anxiety, whatever the case is. Larne have been there, Linfield have been there. They know what it takes, and that's invaluable when it gets down to the tough end of the season.
Yeah, and I just think as much as you would say that Linfield have a really nice front two in Fitzpatrick and Offord, Larne are somewhat benefiting from this rotating cast. Now Paul O'Neill's a part of that, and maybe he has somewhat been the forgotten man over the past few years. He's been there, but perhaps wasn't the absolute main man when there was Bonus and there was Ryan floating around. But they can change it up. Mark Randall is just the experienced player delivering for them, and look, it's a tough matchup for Ballymena. They've had, I think they're on a very similar run to what Portadown have been on. We've kind of talked about this top 4 gauntlet for those two mid-table sides. They've now come off the back of all those games, and yeah, it's another loss. It's losses all around. Probably not totally unexpected based on what we would have thought beforehand. But this is a side that looks slightly all over the place.
You're talking about
Yeah,
Ballymena?
like they don't
I,
they lack very
you
little
know,
killer
um,
instinct.
without wanting to sound like your archetypal Korean person here, but I worry about a little bit about
They're
Ballymena.
they're a bit woolly, aren't
I
they? Like you can see the quality, but they're woolly.
that's like I don't. I just.
That's not a pun, by the way. Actually,
I know I didn't want to say that. Um, I do kind of have my worries about Ballymena. I just, things don't really seem to be going in the right direction up there at all. As you say, they've lost their last four. I think there's a little bit of heat coming on Jim Irvin from a section of fans, shall we say, that don't really see much discernible improvement. Because again, like probably like Glenavon, Ballymena were quite active in the transfer market in the summer. Went and got players in and probably spent a few pounds in getting various players in the door as well. And I think some Ballymena fans are sort of looking and wondering, they're not really seeing any great sign of improvement. Um, I just think going forward, I'm wondering, big success to me is a decent outlet for them up front. He will give you everything, but I just don't really know where else the goals are coming from. Ryan McNichol was actually doing well until he picked up a serious injury, so he's going to be out for a while. I think he had an operation recently. So he had been scoring, and obviously you've got Ben Kennedy, but I don't think he scored an awful lot this season, to be fair. But I would have my fears about Ballymena if they don't arrest this slump in form soon. I wonder, will they potentially, Peter, they could get sucked into maybe playoff positions at the foot of the table. Who knows?
absolutely, it's wide open at the minute, especially with the lack of games that both Cliftonville and Crusaders have played. After those four tough games, and there've been some better performances along the way than maybe what we saw on Saturday. Here's what they have for Ballymena. They go away to Bangor, home to Cruise, away to Glenavon. That is put up or shut up time.
That's
I'm not
that,
saying they need 9 points, but
no,
you
no,
can't be
but
sitting here talking to me with two
I,
or four.
I get 100% what you're saying. If you want to stop that slide, those are the perfect three games potentially. Bangor would be difficult, but Glenavon and who was the other one? Did you say?
It goes Bangor away, Cruise at home, Glenavon away.
Well, like
Like, can they handle the pressure of not messing up against a tricky Cruise side at home
right.
and get the win? And can they go to Glenavon and not like shuffle their feet and get caught up? That
Here's a potential scenario, Peter. If those three games, right? So say Ballymena don't get a decent return from those games, and God forbid that they don't get anything, for example, potentially. Does Jim Irvine, does he really come under pressure
how
in his job?
how can you not be under
Yeah,
pressure when one you've had a lot? No, he was given a contract this year,
yeah,
three year deal. But with other teams around you picking up points, 14 games played, 16 points. They've already lost four in a row. It's poor Cliftonville around them. Crusaders will be giving them a bit of breathing room around them. Bangor's kind of around them, the 3 points
yeah,
ahead. Like I,
yeah.
I said going into this, it was top six, and I was bullish about them being able to do it. It was top six or that back burner's going full whack. And
Mhm.
I think anything bar anything below 5 points, and we're talking about it.
That's tough, isn't it? There's pressure there.
Of
There
course,
is. There's definitely pressure. Oh my. But then
uh,
conversely, if they win those three and they get 9 points,
But that's the is that not the league?
I mean,
You know
you're look
that
suddenly you're looking up the table and you're like your ambitions are changed. So
like there's been plenty of times other man like even Cliftonville fans are saying, "Ah, maybe it's time for Jim." After the way they've been, maybe
mad, isn't
Jim
it?
hasn't got the ideas that you needed, and I'm sure you feel slightly sympathetic towards the situation Cliftonville are in, just with their transition when it comes to
Oh,
being taken over. But let's wrap up the weekend here with a result. I would like to say, for some reason, I was the only one that thought this was going to happen. Now, it took until the final minute and a red card, unfortunately, for Bangor. But Carrick Rangers break their wee mini losing streak and get a result at Clanny Boy. And, I realistically for Carrick, I thought getting all those early points on the board was important. And what we were seeing is that they weren't able to pick up a win here, a wee draw here. But now, based on the past couple of weeks, they beat Portadown at home. They sneak a win away at a Bangor, and everything feels a bit calmer, isn't it? Like we say about maybe the back burner going up, the heat going up in Ballymena. All of a sudden, ooh, not to be heat on Baxter, but there's a more serene feeling.
yeah. Listen, that's some result beating Bangor and Clammy
It's an
Boy
important
because
result.
it's a huge result because Bangor have been so impressive since they've come up, and particularly at home. They've been really, really good, really difficult to beat at their own patch. So for Carrick to go and to keep Bangor quiet and then to actually win it in the last minute, no better time to score, no better time to win the points. Great result, and as you say, the Portadown result for Carrick as well. Those are that's two huge points, or two huge games, I should say, 6 points. And that Carrick Rangers team, I guess, they're a funny sort of side, aren't they? You don't know what you're going to get. You maybe games that you would expect them not to win, they will, and vice versa. But then that's Stephen Baxter, what, 1,000 odd games as a manager. You know, he knows what he's doing. He does.
Yeah, they're a limited side, Carrick, but the players they do have, I mean, can make a difference, and we saw that
Hmm.
with Danny Gibson, a player that I think many other sides will look at and go, wouldn't mind having a player who can run the channels, break through, and is very, very dangerous in the box. Of course, he has his off days, but you get him even slightly in a purple patch, and it's going to be a big difference maker for them. I think they've missed Lecky up top, but that's just the nature of the squad and really of this league. There's not a single side in this division that isn't crying about missing one player or the other. You maybe count Bangor in that, but hey, I don't think many fans are sitting there crying. Maybe the ones that thought maybe we can get ahead of Linfield. They missed their opportunity there on Friday, but at the minute, it doesn't look like it's going to totally bite them.
No, somebody like a Danny Gibson, worth their weight in gold. Maybe he doesn't do it all the time. Maybe he doesn't get that many chances. Scores one, 3 points. That'll do. That's all you need. If you can pick up one win out of every 3 games, you'll not be far away.
We go to this weekend. We'll start on Friday because I don't know there's a huge amount of analysis we can give. Lauren against Portadown. Obviously, there is a whole heap of League Cup games happening on Tuesday night, but well, as I always say, a majority of you all listening, it will already have happened. So we look at Lauren Portadown. Like I've probably been a wee bit based on what I saw there on Friday night. I've probably been I've been a wee bit harsh on Portadown, saying that I'm struggling to see kind of how they're set out and maybe the players making a difference up top. It hasn't really mattered a huge amount because they've had these tough games, but like I haven't looked out of any of them, bar actually that Coleraine game, but that was due to being down to 10 men, not having a goalkeeper in net. And really, it took you getting two corners to kind of break through them. So
100%.
you never know.
100%.
Portadown had the beating of Lauren last year. I don't think it was particularly pretty when they met earlier on this season. I think this is probably going to be another one of those. Oh, we tried. I'm going to go. I'm going to say 2-0 Lauren.
I'll go 2-1, Lauren, but I'm not discounting Portadown out of getting a result either.
It's the goal scoring for Portadown. Like I don't know where. Ubacan is from last year. Fife is working, obviously, from the goals point of view, but I like UKEC. UKEC was a player I really like for them.
It just depends. It depends on what Niall Curry has available to him in terms of players, because I know when he went to the Oval, as I already previously mentioned, he was struggling in terms of players and options. Depends what he has available to him on Friday. But listen, one thing about Niall Curry's team and the Portadown team, you'll always know you're in a game, and that gives him a fighting chance, Peter.
We then go to Saturday, and I want to start at a game that we were prophesizing about earlier on there. Bangor Ballymena. I think this is 1-1.
I think it's a Bangor win.
Really?
I'll go 1-0 for Bangor.
You see, my difficulty is, can Ballymena keep out Bangor? And can Ballymena score more than one? And I don't think they can do either of them.
So what are you
Can I
going
see
for?
I'm going for 1-1, but I can
Right.
see Bangor winning that 2-1 late. Maybe Ballymena, I've got more to them, but I in the same way that what I saw with Glentoran on Friday, you just don't see the fluidity. Like, it feels like they're really missing. Was it Scott? Like that's kind of a nippy player that maybe they're lacking. The shape's kind of odd. Of course, they can stand firm, but that means nothing if you're not really knocking it in. So yeah, 1-1, but a win for Ballymena there would absolutely quell any sort of dissent that there seems to be up in Ballymena. Carrick Crusaders, the Stephen Baxter derby. I mean, I would take a repeat of the start of that game at the start of the season.
Yeah,
I'm sure Carrick would as well. I tell you what, this isn't going to be pretty, this one.
I'll go for a Carrick Rangers win.
I think so as well. I just think
Yeah.
Cruz could huff and they could puff and they could pass, and I just think they're going to bounce off those big beefy boys like McCulloch. Yeah, of
I think
course.
that's a kind of a game Carrick will quite like, and Stephen Baxter, the manager, will quite like, is taking on a relatively lightweight Crusaders team, if you like. And you know what Stephen Baxter, he's going to have his players well primed for that game. So yeah, I see Carrick Rangers win there. That's my take on it.
Plenty of actually Crusaders old boys there. You've got BJ Burns, maybe Lecky if he's starting. You have, Heatley, of course. So, I mean,
That's right.
we talk about Ballymena needing to kind of step up and deal with these high pressure scenarios. That's exactly what it is for Crusaders, because if they can't get points against Carrick, it's one of the few teams that you're thinking, they don't get it against Dungannon Swifts. They aren't getting it against other sides. I kind of fancy.
Carrick's a hard place to go to
Yeah,
get a result.
don't think it's pretty 1-0 Carrick, but a huge lift up for the Crews if they can get a win. Maybe it's a 0-0 draw. We'll have to see. Cliftonville host Dungannon. I mean, if there's one thing that I can recall as true as day when it comes to me talking about this podcast, be it in the cup, be it in the league, Dungannon do like playing up there at Solitude, don't they?
They do. They do. They do. And do you know what? For that reason, I am going to say Dungannon will beat Cliftonville on Saturday.
You see, do you know what's funny? I'm sitting here potentially doing draw. Do you know how little draws there have been in the league this year?
Get off that bench,
Yeah,
Peter.
well, yeah, I think if anyone's going to get it, I think this is 2-0 from Dungannon, and I think it's very similar to what we saw there on Saturday against Crusaders. In fact, I think these are two of the most simple, dirtiest, stinking set piece corner goals.
For who?
Dungannon, 2-0.
For
Yeah.
Dungannon? Oh, okay.
Are
Yeah, that could happen.
are Glenalpin going to turn up to, well, are they going to turn up to home, and will Glentoran turn up in the same way as they did on Friday? Like, I kind of, for Glenalpin, they've got a few players to deal with, but what I'm talking about, it's a Glentoran victory, isn't it?
What are you talking about? It has to be a Glentoran win all
Like, I
day
can
long.
I can see them getting a wee bit stuck in the mud up there at Mourneview, metaphorically, not literally. But you just think they are going to.
They have that. They have a little bit of class
Bert's good, isn't he?
that they'll
I
score.
like Bert.
They'll score goals. They'll score a
Yeah.
goal. either Burt or Jenkins or Stewart or Hubin will score a goal, and that'll be enough to win the points.
Well, I'll
Glenavon, I don't think will
no, I don't
score.
think they will. I think it's 2-0 victory there. A game you were down to talk about. Livefield and
Well,
Coleraine. It's come round very, very quickly. You go down to Windsor Park. Now, I think you guys should be well up for this.
I think Linfield will be well up for
Based
this.
on what?
Yeah, based on the fact that they played probably a week or so ago, Linfield feel and probably rightly could argue they should have been out of sight at half time that day. They had a great opportunity at 2-0. Big Sam Roscoe fired one over the bar into the AVX factory just before half time. Would have made it 3-0, and at 3-0, there ain't no way back for Korean that day. So they will feel if they can replicate that first half performance at Windsor, then they'll go a long way to doing it. The caveat I will say is that's a game Korean will really look forward to playing
Yeah, of course.
at Windsor Park.
Shevlin's got a good record up there, doesn't he?
Yeah, probably got a good record at most places to be fair to him.
That's fair.
Like,
That's true.
you know, listen,
A bit like Gormley. It's
yeah,
always like some sort of record. Oh, this is the 18th time Gormley scored
I know.
past Team
You
X.
know, it's right. It's a completely different game. Obviously, without stating the bloody obvious, right? Linfield being at home at Windsor Park. Now, David Healy and everybody will tell you themselves that sometimes playing at Windsor in front of their own home fans, maybe not the easiest place to play in the world, particularly if things aren't going well. It can be a tough enough place to play for them. Um, they're still the champions, Peter. They're still the defending league champions. Won the league last year by a country mile. So I couldn't, I couldn't write them off. So I would say Linfield probably won about 6-0.
If it's 0-0 at halftime,
Rory told me to say that.
if it's 0-0 at halftime, who does that benefit?
That's a good question. No, at halftime is Korean.
You see, yeah, it's maybe so, maybe so. I think there is a chance to really, really make a marker, and maybe it's not the type
Yeah.
of thing that a team in Colerane's situation wants to be in, because many people will look at this and go, Coleraine, you've got 11 points ahead of Linfield. You're going into their den. You're already kind of saw them try and take you out at home, and you fought back and you looked at the better side. In fact, even that first half, I think you were better, and you just shot yourself in the foot.
Mhm.
Why don't Linfield cannot afford to lose this?
Mm.
Not long term, but in the medium term, they can't afford to lose this and be looking up and seeing that big gap. So, Coleraine,
What are
go for it.
you
Go
saying?
for it.
Are you
Flat to the
saying,
mat, first 10 minutes, and spook him.
Peter? I don't play. I can't do anything about it. Listen, Korean, like, Korean want to just go about their business quietly, and they're not going to shout it from the rooftops. But I would say they're looking forward to that game. Obviously, albeit get Tuesday night League Cup out of the way first. Focus on going up to Linfield. They will have learnt plenty from the previous game a week or so ago. They will have taken plenty from that. Korean usually play okay up there, actually, without maybe tempting fate. But I think generally speaking, they like it up there. I think for Linfield, what is obviously going to tell against them is the loss and the absence of Chris Shields and Jamie Mulgrew, particularly for games like Saturday's game, where you're playing a team such as Korean, where you're looking leaders, guidance on the pitch in a big, big game. You don't have that, so that'll count against Linfield. Coleraine are going plenty of confidence. The thing about with Coleraine is they have goals in the team, Peter, and they'll back them. If they can keep a clean sheet, they will tell you if they can keep a clean sheet, they believe that they've got the players that will score goals at the other end. That gives you always a chance. So, oh, my heart is saying Coleraine, my head's probably saying a draw.
Yeah, I think it's 1-1 here,
Yeah.
but I definitely think if it's victory for Coleraine, what a statement!
Yeah.
This is the look at look at me roar kind of moment, and everybody looks on in fear. I'm sure the Glens and Lauren will say, "Let's go draw," so that they'll be happy with that. But an interesting encounter in theory on the cards, but as we often say here, when it comes to these big games between the top teams, they're rarely sterling results, especially the ones featuring Linfield. So
I think, I think
1-1.
I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a very good game. I think it's actually on the iPlayer again as well,
Yep.
which is like pretty good because the first edition was very good. This one here, I would say, will be equally as good as well. Two good sides going at it. Massive game, even though it is early in the season, Peter. You hit the nail on the head. It's kind of almost you can't say it, but it's kind of a game Linfield can't afford to lose. Can you say that at this
Well, you
stage?
can because to quote
Am I?
the manager,
Am I
they're
saying it?
rubbish, and it would just be so many points behind. So that's where we
Hmm.
are with that. So yeah, we will stick a pin in that there and look forward to the games ahead. I know
It'll
it's
be a
earlier
good
on.
game. I know.
Well, Damien, I've been asking a few people here, just to kind of look back and see where we are from a temperature check. If, and of course, we all can be to look fools here.
Yeah.
If we are looking at a top four being what they are, and Glenavon being unable to get out of
The
the
Meyer.
depths of last, and because I think this is what we'll say many times this season. Anything that isn't 12th is the Mourneview Miracle.
Yes.
So let's say the Mourneview Miracle doesn't happen. We have the top four. Who would you put your money on being the quote best of the rest in fifth? And who would you say you think, unfortunately, is going to have to play off against the championship side and finish
So what are
11th?
you asking? What are you asking me for, Peter?
Fifth
Here,
and 11th.
fifth to 11th.
Fifth. Who do you think's going to be fifth and who do you think's going to be 11th? Best of the rest and 11th.
Oh,
If you had to predict it right now.
no pressure. Hey, no pressure. Did you know what? I would say Dungannon in fifth.
I think that's a very safe bet. And probably
Yeah,
a savvy one based on what we're seeing and what we've seen over the past 18 months
yeah.
from
I think
Stagmore.
I think what we're seeing from them and what we're seeing from the rest of the clubs as well. I don't see like Dungannon seem to have their mojo back, or they're back playing well, and they're a nice, not nice. Nice is not a good word. They're a good, compact footballing team, well balanced between defense and attack. So yeah, yeah, I can see Dungannon finishing going fifth.
Okay, now be the enemy for some side.
Difficult. That is difficult. 11th, 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 11th. That is tough. Flip.
It's amazing when you look at the table and you go, one of these teams are going to be 11th.
Tough. Do you know what? Do you know what? I will have to say Crusaders. I know they're sitting in 11th at this moment in time, but given everything that we've talked about and the pros and cons from all the other teams, I just think I know Crusaders have the capacity to score goals, but leaking goals is going to be their Achilles heel. And I just think their squad depth is maybe not strong enough. If they get one or two injuries up front, they're really, really going to struggle, I think. So yeah, we'll go 11th. It's all sure. You'll not remind me in the
No,
end. You won't remind me. Sure, you won't at the end of the
no,
season. No,
no.
no.
We'll.
Good, that's good.
You have just looked at the table and stuck with the teams that
That's
are
good.
there, but sure,
Which
that's
why
okay.
when I say
Your
it tonight was hard.
experience. That's it. Well, going by that, then Coleraine will be champions, which I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with. Stop the
No,
count, Mr. Mullan.
I
Stop
wouldn't.
the count.
I wouldn't go there.
Well, we will continue to look on and hear you talk to Coleraine managers saying one game at a time, etc., etc. Damian, always a light, fantastic insight.
We're on a journey, Peter. We're on a journey.
We're all on a journey. But the destination is better for some compared to others. Until next time, and hopefully we'll get a wee chat before the end of the season. Maybe I'll be chatting to you about very nice things.
We'll see an Irish League ground somewhere soon, maybe.
David, until next time, cheerio.
Thank you, Peter. Good night. Good luck.
What should I say? Big Coleraine deep dive. You know it was going to come at some point, but who else? Who would have been better than sitting down with non-blade Damian Mullan? Great guy. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I would recommend you follow me on all those social media pages. It's Kick and Match on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok, even though I haven't TikTok in a while. But you can go check out There Around the Grounds, boys, where there's plenty of TikToking going on. Or you could follow this podcast on Spotify podcasts or Apple Podcasts, whatever your flavor is. Go to the main page, hit the wee button. Or if you want to go to YouTube, you can listen to videos of this, which is just an image. You can watch it there. Listen to it there. A small number if you do it, but somebody still do it. So enjoy that, YouTube people. You may be listening to this on YouTube right now. Well done if you are. Bye.